crypto's up, Coinbase's stock is up, and maybe you don't need to overthink it. Maybe it's just a simple play on, look, buy everything in the space, and Coinbase, one of the biggest names in crypto, do not bet against Brian Armstrong in a crypto bull run. Maybe it is as simple as that. And maybe I would say it's time to get irresponsibly bullish on Coinbase. Welcome, everybody, into another Coinage Chat here. I'm the host of Coinage, Zach Usman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios in New York City. We got Nate Skid, the one and only Coinage producer, alongside me here today as we kick things off with Bitcoin approaching that all-important $50,000 number. It's been since before we actually have put Coinage out into the world was the last time that Bitcoin's been around 50K.
Yeah, I was saying I haven't felt this good about crypto since like right before we started this crazy experiment together.
It's been pretty nuts, but I mean, it's been a pretty solid pump to get us here. Texas, I don't know if we have the chart here showing it, but it has been a very long time before we've seen anything like this. Not that one. We'll get into that one in a sec, Texas, on my NDI here. But I mean, it has been pretty wild, and we have a lot to cover today, Nate, when we look at basically everything that's been going on around crypto land, not just price, that we will call on any Coinage community member there to give us your prediction in just a second for a chance to win. But also going to be digging into what we saw at the Super Bowl. Jack Dorsey there with a Satoshi shirt.
Man, that shirt was so cool too. It was like a Nirvana kind of like, throwback.
I mean, there weren't any ads. There were no crypto ads to discuss.
That was wild.
Basically, Jack Dorsey wearing a Bitcoin shirt is basically all we have.
Yeah, Larry David killed the crypto ad on this.
All of that. Looking ahead, though, we also got Coinage earnings. Sorry, not Coinage earnings. We're not doing that. Coinbase earnings will be coming up later on in the show, and an election warning that we had on Friday. You and I can chat through kind of what we're expecting to see this year in a big election year and how crypto plays into all of that. But first, let's get things kicked off, as we said, as Bitcoin moves close to 50K and back above 49,000 for the first time since 2021. Nate, there's been a lot of price predictions. Let me see if I can just...
Some better than others.
Well, that's the problem.
I gotta give you your props, my guy, because I think the last time that we did this together, you were extremely bullish on Bitcoin. I not so much.
Yeah, this would be a throwback back to, I think it was November of last year, is this clip that we're about to play, when I was thinking about the ETFs coming, and I was thinking about the halving coming in April. And you line all these things up. Back then I said, well, I guess, Texas, we can just play the clip. I don't need to quote myself, but thank you for giving me my time.
Yeah, dude.
I think now is the time to get extremely bullish. That's right, ladies and gents. I'm making a call. Now might be the time to get extremely bullish on where crypto goes in 2024 because of all of these things when you add them up. And Nate, I've made the mistake. I'll come out and say it. I've made the mistake of maybe overlooking exactly what's been going on under the hood. There have been a lot of headlines and a lot of reasons to not be bullish on crypto.
Yeah.
FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, take your pick.
Well,
fraud, not good. Overall, though, there's a lot of pent-up excitement in what's going on, and where the hell are all of these funds that are trying to put together Bitcoin ETFs going to get that from? They're going to have to pay an insane premium to get people to part with their Bitcoin, and it is true. It's a matter of when, not if.
But are you putting your money where your mouth is?
I would put my money where my mouth is. The question I have.
Are you putting your money where your mouth is? Not if.
I am. And the question I have for the Coinage community and anyone, I mean, that was it back then.
Man. All right. Let me ask you now, though.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to call out a question now, okay?
Fair.
What's your price call end of 2024?
Nate
Bitcoin?
Skid, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked that, because as we are asking everyone today, a new snapshot vote has now gone live. I'm looking at it here on my screen. What will be the price of Bitcoin to end 2024? And that is a question on everyone's mind, including our community members over the weekend were asking me the same question you just asked me, Nate. And, there's a roundup of a lot of different price targets I was looking at, because you've got Bitmining saying 75K. You got Crypto Quant coming out this morning and saying 112.
Woo!
You got CoinShares at 80K, Standard Chartered at 100K. And Fundstrat, we had Sean Farrell on the show talking about $125,000 was the price to watch.
He has been so correct. And that number is so huge that I don't really know how to put it together in my head. But I want to ask you, Zach, you have to give me something, buddy. Where do you think it ends?
Yeah.
Now holding your feet to the fire. I don't know. Come on. Where do you think this goes?
Well, I'm going to be voting in this proposal just like everybody else, right? And Crypto Quant was the latest one to come out, 112K. Sean Farrell, when he came on the show, said 116. It's always hard to predict where it's going to be at the end of the year, right? Because we can say like a range throughout the year. At the end of the year, a bit of a crapshoot depending on what's really going on at the end of the year. But my vote would be on 110K to wrap up 2024.
Do you remember when Sean first said those numbers to us? And I maybe not you, but I thought, no way. This is so out of bounds because there were so, for 18 months, it was just doom and gloom. Everything was so bad. And then here's this guy saying that the Bitcoin price is going to be something I thought was extraordinarily high. And yet here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to point out anyone can have a price prediction. Anyone can say it's going to go to this.
Yeah.
And so, again, I'm just saying, Crypto Quant with 112K, you can dig into maybe some of the fundamentals, which maybe based on our run of show here, that would be the next thing we have to discuss. But I would call on anyone, by the way, go to the snapshot. You can go to coinage.media to vote in this proposal if you're a Coinage NFT holder. We're going to be giving away essentially the net value of 0.1 ETH for whoever's closest. We'll make sure to keep track as we look at everything to wrap up the year. Once we get there, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, December 31st, we'll look back on everyone's guesses. But good luck, and you'll have your voice heard in terms of where we go. But Nate, when you look at the fundamentals, I do think it is interesting because a lot of what I was thinking in terms of why people would be bullish to see some of the numbers we're discussing now in 2024 is basically the same storyline that we have to discuss in kind of the early innings of the year. Grayscale out with a new report kind of looking at a lot of these different issues when you say, okay, how do we arrive at 110,000 if you believe my price target or if you believe any of the other ones we're discussing? And a lot of it has to do with a lot of the same things that everyone knew would be coming. But I think the ETFs are actually off to a hotter start than people give credit for. Of course, if you're looking at Grayscale's research report, which I am here, you might say, of course, Grayscale as one of the leading kind of companies dealing with Bitcoin ETFs, not surprising that they're going to come out with a note that says it actually is different this time around. But Nate, we've talked about ordinals, we've talked about inscriptions. There's a lot of like activity that's actually coming back into the Bitcoin network, excitement around quote unquote Bitcoin NFTs that are supporting miners. I mean, the actual fundamentals here do support, and I think we're seeing that right now as Bitcoin prepares to cross 50K. We haven't seen this level of excitement in a long time.
Well, what do you feel the best about within the fundamentals?
I mean, I think, one of the charts that did stand out to me, and this is the one that we did call out, Texas, around, inscriptions, like what I just said from this report we're looking at here, is actually this one. So it's the daily inscription fees, right? Because we've talked about miners being under pressure for so long. Obviously, the halving coming at a time when maybe this will help miners out. We've seen them kind of do the difficult things that they needed to do in the bear market when it was a little shaky in terms of if you have Bitcoin going down. Some of these miners could have been caught flat-footed if they didn't have the right kind of allocation on their balance sheets. They would have been screwed. But now you've got inscriptions helping them out. You've got the halving coming. You've got the ETFs cooking. You've got the basic backbone of the crypto market really functioning the way that it's supposed to function. And as crazy as everyone thinks this space is, that it's just pure speculation all the time, there are fundamentals that are powering the price moves we often see.
It has to be the ETFs though, right? More than anything else.
It doesn't hurt. I think, again, you were listening to Pomp. We had Pomp on the show.
Yeah.
That interview with him is still up on YouTube. I mean, you can go back and look at that. I mean, the ETFs do, from a attention standpoint, right? If you think about just what we saw play out in January, it is huge.
Just some top things that Pomp said in the interview today on CNBC. He said that 4 funds have hit $1 billion in inflows, which is wild. The biggest being $4 billion to BlackRock, $3.5 billion to Fidelity. But he also said something that I didn't quite understand, and maybe you can kind of shed some light on it. He said that 80% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in 6 months, right? That's a lot of Bitcoin sitting in wallets, correct?
I mean, yeah. When you think about how this all goes in the
sorry
price,
for the basic lesson I'm asking for here, but
I think it's always important to go back to basics. And supply and demand is not a Bitcoin thing. That's just a general markets thing. And so many people have talked about if we're going to see a bunch more money flow into, because institutional investors can now access Bitcoin easily through these ETFs. What is that going to do to the supply and demand functions of Bitcoin right when the exact number of Bitcoin that get issued by miners goes down in half in April. So where are they going to kind of get the Bitcoin they need to supply for these ETFs?
Is this not a problem?
It's
because
not
like I don't understand this, because like if his palm says the demand for Bitcoin is 12x the supply, how is this okay long term?
I mean, eventually markets take care of these issues, right? The price goes up, people sell. That's generally how it's going to go, I think, in kind of the right way to look at this, right? Or wallets that, again, haven't been selling will eventually be pressured to sell because the price goes so high. So, I mean, that's the thesis.
That's the thesis.
That's a bullish thesis.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I just, to me, it just seems like there's something... there's a complicating factor when you're talking about using Bitcoin as a currency, right? Because it is true. Like if the price of Bitcoin could skyrocket because the supply is choked, right? But demand is outstripping that. Why would anybody want to use that currency as anything other than like a savings?
Yeah, I think that's we've discussed that. We've discussed that in detail before, and it is kind of one that's up in the air. There's a lot of smart people are debating, like, what is this really? And I think the currency piece, as much as people want to build on it as a layer 2, you know, the Lightning Network and the idea of using Bitcoin as payments, who knows where that goes? But for right now, it's a lot easier to wrap your mind around, okay, I'm just going to hold Bitcoin, and this is kind of what we've talked about. Do we need all this liquidity? Caitlin Long has talked about this forever. We've had her discuss this. And they're two different things. Whether you want to look at it as cash, whether you want to look at it as digital gold, whatever, all I'm saying is a lot of money is moving into the space, and we'll have to see kind of how people start to use a lot of this.
It is definitely, it feels very different than 2 years ago, where this was an experiment that might or might not take root. I think it has fully taken root. And so it's going to end up somewhere. I just, you know, my simple brain is having a difficult time figuring out how this plays out long term if the supply is so tight, if demand is so high, if this is supposed to be a way to democratize currency, or democratize money, or at least separate money from state, how that actually functions. If the price of it will continue to go up, will people actually be willing to depart or part with their Bitcoin? Because if I had one and I was sitting here looking at people saying it's going to go to 112, I sure as shit am not going to get rid of it. And even if it is supposed to go up, it's like, human nature is that, like, if I think that it's going to continue to go up in price, I'm going to want to continue to hold it. So what's going to be the thing that gets people to let go of it? I don't know.
Oh, price. It depends. It depends on if you're on the side of, all right, how much money do you have in dollars versus how much money do you have in Bitcoin? And that's kind of, everyone individually is probably looking at. Funds are looking at it. Individuals are looking at it. Countries are looking at it. Let's not forget that piece that we haven't really seen come back into the fold. Like, it depends on how exposed you want to be. And that, I think, is the biggest question. And again, we'll be looking at how this vote goes, where our community thinks maybe some of this could be completely out of line with reality. And I'm kind of curious to see where an existing community in Web3, such as ours, they leading, by the way, community. And Sean Farrell is one of our members, and he says 125. I'm curious to see if the rest of us agree with him, disagree with him. So you can head to Coin-to-Shop Media and check out that vote. We'll link to it at the top in just a sec. Or you can just vote on Snapshot right now. I'm looking at the live polling, and we'll update that as we see the notes come in. But elsewhere, Nate, I do want to point out, as much as we talk about fundamentals, let's not forget kind of the animal spirits piece of all this too, because Jack Dorsey rocking a Satoshi shirt at the Super Bowl, as dumb as it might sound, like, that is exactly the type of thing that drives more attention to it all.
Well, what's so funny is how last year, it was just all about the ads, right? Like, it was everywhere. It was everything. And this year, it's a t-shirt. And I think that just goes to show so much about, it's just a great example or a metaphor for crypto, which was, when things weren't so great and things were on shaky ground, the appearance of it was amazing. It was Super Bowl ads, and it was arena names, and it was, Tom Brady and Giselle with SPF. And now where things look to be more fundamentally sound and there's actual movement and momentum, it's a t-shirt. Yeah, and I just love that. I think that's something about that I really enjoy.
Well, I mean, how do we think that might change, right? Because, again, looking at it, it's Jay-Z and Beyonce in the box. And I guess, Jack Dorsey wasn't spotlighted in this, by the way. It was really, he's kind of off to the edge. It wasn't as if it was a zoom in on Jack Dorsey's t-shirt, though we are doing that now. I mean, it's a little bit different than a 30-second spot with Larry David, to your point, Nate. But I mean, think about how this could change. What happens if Bitcoin hits 100K? That would put us, maybe mid-year? I'm not entirely sure what sport event is then. The Super Bowl is kind of in a league of its own. I don't know what you want to use then. But I mean, I'm just saying that part of the reason why is there was a lot of money in crypto back then. There was an AI ad, a few of them, at the Super Bowl. So these are kind of the way things go. But it could change.
Well, it's just, I feel like there's a difference between trying to be shiny and exciting and entertaining in the way that the ads were last year versus this year. I don't know. I just feel like it was a more subtle kind of nod. Only people that knew or were in the know kind of even picked up on it. The shirt's moving on Etsy right now, so obviously somebody really liked it. But I don't know. I feel like there's just it's becoming a little bit more sober. I think the idea of crypto in the general public, and I thought that it was just a really appropriate kind of way for crypto to still be in the discussion without it being kind of as prominent. It just felt like all the crypto as the Larry David one was really entertaining, but it was just kind of hyping something that was kind of maybe not quite ready for that yet. Versus now, where it's just a little bit more sober. It was just a tiny little nod. It wasn't even supposed to be there, and yet here we are talking about it.
It's a nice little Easter egg for anyone who was watching. It was just okay, cool. I'm glad we're repped somehow. And of course, I don't know, everyone's talking about Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z and everything. And let's not forget, it was Block that stepped in. First of all, Jack Dorsey's a big Bitcoiner, so not surprising to see him wearing it. But also maybe some people were surprised, why is Jack Dorsey hanging out with Jay-Z? But they're friends. And, the Block saved Tidal. They bought Tidal, or at least a big stake in it. So they got that music relationship going on too, but they also work a lot on Bitcoin education. It's surprising. They do that out here in Brooklyn too. It's a thing that they work on together.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So, he's orange pilled Jay-Z, and who knows, maybe Beyonce will be doing it at some of her concerts too. The other thing to watch though, Nate, of course, we talk so much about Bitcoin. It's not the only way to play crypto. The other one that a lot of mainstream institutional investors or just investors, retail, look at too is Coinbase. Their earnings are coming up on Thursday. That's a big thing to keep an eye out for as a company that increasingly, I'm looking at the stock chart right now, $150 per share basically is where Coinbase is. It's taking a bit of a breather, bit of a pullback depending on how you look at this chart. As Bitcoins come back in, as we approach 50K, Coinbase, of course, also bouncing back. One interesting take to dig into here is Coinbase. Everyone talks so much about the revenue that they bring in through fees in trading. As we chatted about with Bloomberg Intelligence's James Seifert a little bit ago, and we have that clip from him, was increasingly Coinbase is being used as the custodian provider for all of these ETFs. So they're also making money on that front. But there could be, Nate, and we'll get into this on the other side of this clip, a weird pro-con narrative around Coinbase. And I think the earnings report on Thursday is going to be very interesting because as good as it is that they're making money on the ETFs themselves for being the custodian, they also might see, because fees have come down on those ETFs so much, it's cheaper to get access to Bitcoin than buying it directly through Coinbase. Take a listen to what James Seifert told us just a few weeks ago.
We didn't really mention is how low these fees are, which you showed before. That's going to trickle into the ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem. I mean, some of these institutional custody platforms are charging higher than these full expense ratios on these ETFs. So they're gonna, it's gonna trickle through. Look for commissions on some of these platforms that are typically trading these things to start tightening in competition with these ETFs once they're launched and are operating efficiently on the U.S. markets. The one thing I would say is just look at what Coinbase and Gemini and some of the other platforms charge for recurring buys via your phone. They're charging like 3% or more round trip fees in some cases. So I think hopefully ETFs will cause them to lower that for the end investor. Look, at the end of the day, this competition, yes, it might hinder or hurt some of these more crypto native players who have been rent seeking, I guess, in some ways. But at the end of the day, this is going to be really good for end investors. And that's something I've been saying for years. Once this happens, once the ETF ecosystem gets a hold of this asset class, it is going to drive down prices across the board. That's what they've done throughout history and continue to do.
So there you go, Nate. I mean, that's kind of like the both sides of the coin, no pun intended, Coinbase argument. Both sides of Coinbase. And I don't know what we're going to learn about it. Obviously, they'll give an update, I think, in terms of how all of this playing out helps or hurts the company itself. But very interesting kind of like unintended consequence piece of what we think about when we're looking at Coinbase.
Well, Coinbase is interesting to me because are they still going through their lawsuit, right?
Yes, there is also still that overhang. Unclear exactly what you can say about that other than, it's playing out in the courts. But I'm sure Brian Armstrong will get asked about that on the earnings call too.
No, I understand. I just wonder how tied in all of these things are together. Like, I wonder if, how successful can a company be with something like that hanging over it?
I mean, I think that's, again, we're going to get into this in a sec, but why I think 2024 is such a huge year, not just for Coinbase as a leading crypto company, but for the industry in general. One thing I will say, and I don't know if I want to make this call necessarily today, Nate, is, I mean, if you think about it, if you want to be irresponsibly bullish on Bitcoin back then, obviously Coinbase is a company very levered to the moves of crypto. Generally, if crypto's up, Coinbase's stock is up. And maybe you don't need to overthink it. Maybe it's just a simple play on, look, buy everything in the space, and Coinbase, one of the biggest names in crypto. Do not bet against Brian Armstrong in a crypto bull run. Maybe it is as simple as that. And maybe I would say it's time to get irresponsibly bullish on Coinbase.
I'm just excited by the excitement. It's I think there are different levels of, or I guess, people's experiences in crypto are different depending on how long they've been in the game. And because I haven't been in a bull cycle before, I haven't really experienced what it feels like to be excited about all of these price moves. I have a hard time going all in, man, because I've just been burned so many times before.
Well, I mean, this is kind of if you back up and look at the chart even farther back, right?
Okay.
If we can bring this up, Texas, if we can bring this up, Coinbase chart longer term, right? Mm-hmm. You could buy today, and you could buy it at a cheaper price than I did or anyone did on IPO day, right? Sure. $300, pretty much, kind of the first days of trading. If you were super excited about Coinbase and just held it all the way down, and now you're seeing, oh, wow, it's a huge pump up, a more than 100% move over the last few months. You're still buying it cheaper than people did on day one.
But
so
you've still lost half.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that you, as what you're talking about, you can jump in and you could buy it at a better price than people did on day one and still run in the bull run. So I don't know. I'm just saying, some people think they miss the boat all the time in crypto. Some people are afraid to get burned. And certainly you can if you're not investing with a smart time horizon.
Well, one thing that's interesting to me is how little we've heard about any of this in the run up to the election cycle, right? Yeah. Like, there was a little bit about, what's it, a CBDC, the central
bank digital currency? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we heard a little bit about that, and Ron DeSantis made some waves about it. We've heard RFK Jr. talk a little bit about crypto, but all in all, there are some really big moves happening that seem to be fundamental and foundational to the kind of the prevalence of crypto as a ongoing feature of our financial system. Mm-hmm. And when you have things like democracy is at stake, or, you have these huge kind of themes running into the election, that this seems so small and it seems like such a niche that nobody's taking it seriously or discussing it seriously, yet the ramifications could be huge. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, when will crypto or the ETFs or any of this entire discussion kind of like break into the main dialogue of the electorate?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one I don't necessarily have the answer to, but I do think it is interesting to think about if we do go to this election as a key. I know it's a key moment in the space, right? Obviously, crypto dealing with another 4 years of a Biden presidency would be pretty huge in terms of the way that Gary Gensler's run the SEC, in terms of the way that, Elizabeth Warren has talked about raising an anti-crypto army and shutting it down and bringing people on to co-sponsor a bill that would basically restrict the crypto industry in the U.S. So it's a huge thing. But I would use this example of what Joe Biden tweeted last night, which was a meme that was Dark Brandon that a lot of people misconstrued. If you are on crypto Twitter, a lot of people in the Bitcoin space were saying, wait a minute, is Joe Biden endorsing Bitcoin now, or what is this?
Wait,
But this
Bitcoin,
is just
Bitcoin maxis thought anything that
laser
looks
eyes.
I understand what it is, but I also understand how ridiculous it is to say that that's Bitcoin related.
Yes, apparently, if you're not in crypto, it was obvious to you that this was just about the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl and this conspiracy theory idea that he's trying to get Taylor Swift to go after Travis Kelce so that he can win the endorsement and win this election. Which I thought
this is fact.
It is fact.
Know?
It is fact that he wants Taylor Swift's endorsement. But was it fact that he would go through Bitcoin to get there?
Well, again, it's just, the importance of really getting this right, and the fact that I think that the ETFs prove that Bitcoin and crypto in and of itself are going to become like just a permanent feature of our financial system. It's just weird to me that these discussions haven't taken place, or at least there hasn't been more of a national conversation as far as I'm concerned. And I think I really bridged the two worlds between the degens and the normies who have absolutely no idea what any of this stuff means. It's just eventually it's going to bleed in. The opportunity and the discussions are going to bleed in. And I wonder when this will become a key kind of campaigning point or something like that. Yep. as this happens.
I think so. We had Perry Ann on Friday come on the show and talk about this. CEO and founder of Digital Chamber of Commerce, one of the huge advocacy groups for crypto, lobbying in Washington, informing politicians on both sides of the aisle about why these issues matter and why Senator Elizabeth Warren has gotten a lot of things wrong when it comes to crypto. And essentially, Perry Ann called this an existential threat to crypto. I just want to play a little bit of what she said and why now in 2024 this is such an important time for the industry.
We are facing an existential threat today in Washington. It is absolutely critical that the community participates in the political process and ensures that anti-crypto politicians are not elected into office.
I mean, it's not only that they're not elected into office. I think if you listen to a full interview, which is up on Coinbase.media right now, you would learn that it's not just even the president that matters for this, but it's also all the other kind of institutions that the president then fills, right? Obviously, there's a spillover effect. Mm-hmm. And you got the SEC and you got the EIA now kind of policing what people do with energy in tech. And a lot of people are, in the crypto industry, very worried about that because now the EIA is trying to monitor and study where these Bitcoin miners are, how much energy they're using, and saying, look, this is not just a crypto problem. Eventually, the government could come for data centers, could come for chip makers, which they already kind of are. Yeah. Like all of this spills over into AI, and how much control should the government really have? Well, and that, I think, is a crossover issue.
Well, this just gets me back to my main question here, which is, with all of these unknowns, you have two narratives kind of like happening at the same time. You have crypto becoming more fundamental and foundational, and you have it really taking root to the fact that they're now ETFs. I think just proves that that crypto's here to stay. And then you have all of this uncertainty, right? And you have a lot of questions about how it will operate or be able to operate in the United States long term. So on one hand, you have the financial sector that is really tying itself to this. And on the other hand, you have a regulatory sector or government agencies that are looking for ways to kind of like diminish or get rid of it. And I just don't know how these two things play out over time. Will this become a political issue? Like, will this become an issue where people that are, the don't tread on me's or whatever are going to be really gunning for it and expecting their politicians to kind of defend crypto and what it stands for and the importance of a separation between money and state? Mm-hmm. Or, is this going to be something that the regulatory environment will never allow it to really take hold, and therefore it can never really fulfill its true promise? Sure. Or it will be seen as just kind of like, Betamax versus DVD or whatever it was. And of course there can only be one. And my ultimate contention is, why would the US government want to allow a competing currency, in the US, especially if the importance of having the dollar be the most important currency in the world is tied. So I don't know. Again, I'm not an economist or any of that. I can just ask these weird questions because I think it's just fundamental to the project.
I think a lot of people are flagging that, right? And I mean, again, politics is never rooted in fact, really. It's which message gets the most votes, right? And so you can spin it both ways. If you want to spin it as, why would we have this currency that is undermining the dollar? That's one way to go. Or you could say Bitcoin is freedom and liberty and allow people to do what they want to do. And if it so happens that, this is a currency that a lot of Americans hold, by the way,
Yes.
that they also include in their portfolios, by the way, as it becomes more ingrained in this idea of anyone can be exposed to it in as much as they want to be exposed to it, that arguably could be more American. And I think it's been interesting to see both parties now make that message. And we've seen a lot of Republicans come out anti-government, as you might expect them to be, and say, let the people do what they want. What you're describing, where it gets very interesting in 2024, is this idea of third parties. And the only political ad we saw at the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, was RFK.
Yeah.
And as a third-party candidate, we know where he falls on Bitcoin as being kind of the first pro-Bitcoin president, as he branded himself. What does that do if he kind of starts to become more important? Could he possibly push Democrats a little bit more pro-Bitcoin? Could he upend some of this? I mean, we've seen how important third-party candidates can be. Obviously, the Libertarian Party in the past, as we've highlighted on this show, sometimes not so great in their results. But important on the fringe. Important on the fringe.
Right.
So who knows? But
the
important time regardless.
I mean, crypto could potentially be one of those kind of rare topics that kind of get some support on both sides of the political spectrum. I can imagine that there's going to be some Democrats that could understand the importance of having.
There are right now.
Yeah. And I think there could be some Republicans who are very interested and excited about, being able to exercise their own freedom and their own freedom of choice. What'll be interesting is to see how this gets politicized. Everything in America gets politicized, and this 100%. And the most interesting thing to me is that because the financial sector is so adopting Bitcoin right now and are so gung-ho about it, it ain't going anywhere.
No.
It isn't going anywhere. And
No, it's not.
I'm very, very interested to see how this all plays out.
You think that BlackRock throwing billions of dollars is going to go anywhere? That's the craziest part to me. Go ahead.
What if there was a political movement that started to really regulate it and to start to look at, well, maybe the energy consumption is a little off. Maybe there are some portions of this that need to be looked at and need to be regulated. And all of a sudden, you're going to have these competing interests. It's just going to be wild. Like once crypto, not just Bitcoin or not just Ether, whatever, but once crypto itself becomes politicized, it is going to be wild.
I think it's already happened, and I think we're going to see what happens in 2024, not just in the election, but again, we'll leave you with this in terms of going to vote in our snapshot right now at coinage.media. We'll have the link up there. Where will the price of Bitcoin end in 2024? Where's it going to end today, by the way, in the short term? Potentially back above 50K. There's a lot of things coming. Nate Skid, I appreciate you hopping in the seat today in the studio.
I'm sorry if I dumbed down this conversation too much for you DJs
I don't think so. I think, again, Super Bowl last night, a lot of people talking about all kinds of things coming back together. The great American holiday.
You said 110 Bitcoin.
That's what I said. I'm on record, 110 to wrap it up.
I'm going 85 on the record.
Oh, okay, fair enough. We'll see where the rest of the community votes as well. Again, head to coinage.media. We'll give away 0.1 ETH, the value there in a Coinage Caucus NFT. Appreciate everybody listening again. You can head to coinage.media for more on all the stories we cover. For Nate, appreciate it, man. Woo. For myself, for everybody here at Coinage. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you again soon.